The European Parliament has branded Theresa May's proposals on EU citizens' rights a damp squib and said they will not approve a Brexit deal that does not offer them more. It says Europeans in the UK will have fewer rights than Britons in the EU. In the articles published across Europe, the European Parliament's chief Brexit negotiator, Guy Verhofstadt, and other key figures said the Prime Minister's proposals for the 3 million EU nationals that live in the UK fall short of its own ambitions to put citizens first. But Theresa May's Cabinet Office Minister Damien Green said the basic rights of EU citizens living in the UK would be preserved. He went on to say Mr Verhofstadt should read our proposals, which the government insists would allow about 3 million EU citizens to stay on the same basis as now. Mr Verhofstadt described the differences between the EU's proposals for UK citizens in Europe and EU citizens in the UK as striking. The articles say that the UK offer risks creating a second class of citizenship, and that it contradicts even the Vote Leave manifesto, which it said promised it would treat EU citizens no less favourably than at present. They say the UK proposal falls short because it would take away citizens' rights they currently have and create new red tape and uncertainty for millions of people. The papers went on to make it clear that there could be no extension to the 31st of March deadline for 2019 for the Brexit negotiations to finish, as elections for the European Parliament are due to take place in May of that year, by which point the UK must be out. The negotiations have been criticised, with Liberal Democrat leader Tim Farron said the government's approach had turned our closest allies against us. I'm joined now by UKIP's Elizabeth Jones to discuss the latest stumbling block of Brexit negotiations. What are your thoughts on the latest proposals by the UK for EU citizens?
Well, I think the proposals are very generous. No one's being asked to go home. I think it's been whipped up by a lot of far-left scaremongering about this. It's very similar to the current system we have, known as indefinite leave to remain, which applies to people outside the EU. So I don't understand why we're going through this transitional phase, why the EU citizens seem to expect, or the EU seems to expect, that we should now give them exalted status above other people who are also in a similar position. We've got plenty of Russians, Australians, Americans, Chinese also wanting to apply for residency in the United Kingdom, and they're just going to have to go through the same process because it's equality for all.
Elizabeth, the European Parliament says it goes back on a Leave manifesto to treat EU citizens no less favourably than at present. So do you think the EU could go back on any pledge to be favourable to the UK in future?
I think we're at a very, very early stage, and I don't think that there was necessarily any manifesto promise or pledge with regard to that. I mean, when you think about it, why should the EU citizens applying for settlement status or permanent residency in the UK be treated differently from anyone else? As I said earlier, we've got Russians, we've got Australians, we've got Americans, Chinese, all want to apply for residency status, and why should the EU citizens suddenly have priority over them? I mean, really, we're leaving the EU. I think this is what the EU cannot grasp. We've had Brexit and we're going. Just let us go. Stop trying to force us to be attached to you by demanding that our migration processes have to be finally decided by the European Court of Justice. This is what it's about. It's about desperately retaining sovereignty.
Now, you mentioned there that we're leaving, but what about the British citizens that are currently that are going to be left in the EU? What could happen to them if it's not dealt fairly on both sides?
Well, there's about 1.2 million British citizens throughout the EU. A lot of those are retired. They've invested their capital into the country they're living in, buying property, perhaps buying businesses, and they're getting a regular income stream either through state retirement pension or their own pension funds. So I don't think they're going to be a fiscal burden to their country of choice where they're living now. And I don't think anything too bad's going to happen to them. The EU's already said that they can stay and that if they have a final recourse, they can use the European Court of Justice, which is, if they're living in the EU, is their final court. So I'm reasonably hopeful that their position will be secure.
Brexit negotiations only just started. This is another stumbling block. Where will this leave the negotiations?
Well, it's going to be completely different. I presume the next topic I would hope would be the situation with regard to a trade agreement and whether we enter into a free trade agreement with the EU and how that will progress. And I have every confidence that the EU and its negotiators will do all they can to add the friction into the mix, will do all they can to delay and come up with all sorts of hurdles for us to jump through, because essentially they don't want us to leave. I mean, these EU commissioners, they're on a fantastic gig, the best gig of their lives. You know, they're not going to be able to achieve this level of power, influence, pay and benefits in the private sector or in any other area of employment. And they know their time is up. They know that we're a major contributor to the EU funds, and when we go, there's going to be a big financial hole for them to fill, and they're worried about their jobs, and they're worried about their children's jobs, and their girlfriends' jobs, and the mistresses' jobs, all being doled out in the EU. So it's a problem. It's going to be a friction ride all the way. Of course, we're all going to have friction burns.
It's still unclear what will happen then at the end of these negotiations and what the final deal will look like between the EU and the UK. UKIP's Elizabeth Jones, thank you for discussing this with me today on Radio Sputnik.